Is that us? Hi everyone, and thanks very much for joining us for our webinar here talking about trade show marketing. So trade shows are back on the calendar again this year after taking a little bit of a hiatus for a while because of COVID. And anybody that works in the manufacturing and engineering sector knows that they're a massive part of the marketing in that sector. So we thought we would get two guests who have quite a bit of experience in the trade show area to come in and have a chat with us just around about the experience during COVID for the last few years and their plans for this year and what they look like. So if I could just introduce our guests first off. So on my virtual left, we have Kristen Randall of Haver and Bacher Niagara, and on my right we have Julie Andrews from McCluskey International. So thanks very much for joining us, ladies, from Canada of all places. So a little bit of an international feel to this one than our previous webinar, so we appreciate you taking the time on a Monday morning to do this with us. One of the things I'd like to start off is if we could start with you, Kristen, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us about your role with Haver Bacher and how long you've worked in the sector and what you enjoy most about trade shows. Sorry, we've got a bit of an issue with your audio there, Kristen, I think.
Oh.
Is it okay now? It's fine. No, we're good. We're good. Sorry, go ahead.
We're all good now?
Yes, all good.
Okay. Well, thank you, Peter. My name is Kristen Randall. I'm from Haver and Bacher Niagara. I work out of our St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada facility. I've been with Haver for about 16 years now, actually 16 years as of last week. From marketing from day one. And I would say what I really like about trade shows is, just all the people you get to see at each of these shows. Everyone's always so excited to be there, building connections. And also, as we'll talk about today, the chaos on the marketing side.
Absolutely. And Julie, if you want to do the same, so tell us a little bit about your experience with McCluskey's and what it is about trade shows that makes you want to keep coming back.
Well, thank you, Peter. Actually, I have been a little less time than Kristen with McCluskey. I've been there for 10 years, and I am the Global Marketing and Communications Manager, really straddling virtually anything that touches a customer for McCluskey International. So not just the trade shows, but it's a really nice way to integrate trade show marketing into our overall strategy and our planning. And what I love about trade shows is the adrenaline. I really love the setup phase and the deadlines and getting ready to get everything in place. And then that moment when the show opens, it's all about the adrenaline.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much. Now, we talked about this the other day whenever we did the briefing for this. Anybody that's been doing trade shows for any period of time has plenty of war stories. So I suppose I've been interested to start with a few and hear some of the experiences that maybe, as Julie mentioned, the adrenaline maybe got the adrenaline going a little bit, or started to make it a little bit nervous about your appearance at the show. So I'll kick off with one example. I remember when I was a trainee marketing manager with a company called Armatile here in Northern Ireland. They were ceramic tile retailers, distributors, and manufacturers, and we did a trade show down in Dublin for architects, and I stayed with a few friends in Dublin the night after the trade show had finished and had volunteered to look after all the inquiries from the show, this was back in 1999. So this was paper forms, business cards stapled to them, all ready to go back to the office and distribute to the sales guys the following morning. Got up on the Sunday morning and went out to the car, and the window of the car was smashed, and the box file with all of the inquiries from the show was no longer there. So I spent the rest of the Sunday trying to figure out how I was going to tell the boss when I went back in on Monday that the show we had now spent a small fortune on, we now had none of the inquiries for. So that was an interesting experience on that Sunday, very, very early in my marketing life. It actually worked out in our favor in the end, because the trade show organizers were able to get us the attendee list for the show, and we sent a mail shot and email campaign out to them all explaining the sub story of what had happened, and actually ended up with more inquiries than we had taken at the show, from people who said, "Oh, that's terrible. maybe you should come down and see us. We might have a project for you at some stage. So that was one example of something that went wrong for me. Julie, could we start with you then? If you could give us an example of yours.
Well, Peter, a couple come to mind. One's very quick and easy. It's a case of being at a very influential show and having my sales rep walk onto the floor and see absolutely nothing in our booth on the day before show open. So he called me and he said, there's a box of brochures. I see pens. There's nothing else. So I called our stand company at the time and I said, my rep is there and there's nothing there. And there's this long, dead silence, nothing. So I broke the silence and I said, you forgot about my trade show, didn't you? And they had to admit they did. So the day before the show opened, they were scrambling through their warehouse and trying to get assets and everything pulled together and graphics done overnight and rushed to a show. And they were based in a whole different state. So happy ending. It worked out okay, but lots of adrenaline on that one. The other one was a much larger issue. In fact, it was a 145-foot long issue. And basically, we were assembling this machine at ConExpo from the bolts up. And ultimately, it was going to be 7-meter high and a lot of moving pieces. It arrived in 11 containers. And as we started to build, we suddenly realized that there was quite a pitch in the parking lot. And all of a sudden, we had the whole front end of this, 70 feet, that was suspended in the air and needed to be shored up. So we got welders and we got things to shore it up, and then it looked terrible. So then we got carpenters and we got them to build a surround on it, and that looked terrible. And then we got painters in to paint the carpentry, and that still looked terrible because the inside looked not right. So then we got aggregate and we got landscaping stone and we poured it into the whole base of it. Then it looked great. But that was a real horror story because the whole process took, I would say, 4 days of agony, really.
I suppose it's a lesson. I mean, before we move on to Kristen's, once you've been doing these shows for a while, I think, Julie, from your experience there, you realize that stuff like that will happen, and it might be a big thing and it might be a small thing, but your ability to respond quickly and come up with a solution ultimately is a very important part of the job, isn't it?
It's a critical part of the job, honestly. If you love solving problems, it is 100% the best spot for you because there's always going to be a problem. I have not had one show, and I've done hundreds of shows now. I have not had one show where a problem didn't arise that needed some kind of solution.
Okay, Kristen, right? Okay, war story time. Tell us some of your experiences.
Yeah, we at Havre Boca, we like to exhibit outdoors, and that has numerous challenges with it. So mine are all outdoors. The first one I can remember was ConExpo 2011. This is my very first outdoor show organizing. And we had this great little spot in the blue lot outdoors, and we were constructing a tent, and we had a building which was going to kind of have like a kitchen, office, meeting area. And so we had all the equipment in place. And I remember the week of setup, I thought, it's Vegas, it's outdoors, it's going to be sunshiny, we're going to pack shorts and t-shirts, we have a great time out there. It was freezing all week long. I mean, we had to go out and we all had matching Las Vegas sweatshirts, and we were still shivering, setting up this booth. So finally the show opens and it's the morning, and I mean, it's been a stressful week. And I get to the booth probably an hour before showtime, and I realized that this so-called flat piece of land that my booth is on wasn't so flat after all, and it had rained all night. And in the corner of my booth where the tent and this building matched up to each other, there had to be a good 2 feet of water. So I'm thinking, I'm in the desert, it's supposed to be warm, it rained all night, I'm still freezing, and I have this 2-foot pool to deal with. What am I going to do? So turns out Vegas has these great vacuums at the convention center that will vacuum up all your water because it just doesn't go anywhere. So that happened also again the second day, but of course now we know how to deal with the problem. But that certainly wasn't anything I ever expected to deal with at a trade show. The other story that comes to mind in 2017, again at ConExpo, we had this great spot in the silver lot this time, right in the corner. It was going to be like right where people were coming in the door. We were so excited about this spot. And a few weeks before the show, we checked the move-in schedule and realized we only have 48 hours to set up an entire wash plant in this fantastic spot we ordered. How the heck are we going to do this? So I remember the trade show working with the manager there. And he said to me, I'll make you a deal. If you can move in on this day at 2 a.m., you can get a 12-hour head start. And we took it. We were up all night putting this plant together. It was wild. And then even the last ConExpo 2020, the last thing we did before the world shut down, we shipped a portable plant out there and realized that permitting changes from state to state. So, I mean, we shipped this thing 6 weeks out and had to get permit after permit for each state it went through. And finally, it landed in Utah and was involved in a traffic accident. And so we had to send people down to this manufacturing plant that we found where they spent a week fixing this machine before it ended up on site. So there is, like Julie said, there are so many problems, so many challenges to deal with, but it is exciting. And just when you think you've done them all, you haven't. There's something new around the corner.
I mean, I think it speaks to that idea that, you have to be really, really, really focused on the attention to detail stuff, because anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And you almost have to have those contingency plans, don't you, whenever you're planning these shows, to think, what's the worst thing that could happen here, and plan for that worst case scenario. Because very often you have to put that plan into action at some point. So thanks very much for those. They're interesting. Hopefully they give people who, with the experience that you two have particularly, realizing that no matter how long you've been doing this, there are still surprises that come along and that have to be dealt with whenever they arise. So I suppose one of the questions relating it back to people doing the marketing job, a lot of what we do now is digital. So in an increasingly digital world, in the sector that we're all familiar with, why do you think trade shows have remained as important as they have? Julie, if we could start with you there.
I think the biggest reason, particularly in this industry, is because while a design is done on paper and is the birthplace of a machine, the final stage of a machine is something that people want to interact with. They want to actually have that experience. If it's a loader, they want to sit in the seat. They want to feel the controls. If it's a jaw crusher like ours, they want to look inside the jaw chamber and see the depth in reality, not necessarily in a 3D drawing or even in an animation. That said, I think there's a really good synergy between the two, and combining technology plus that interaction that I think people crave and have very much missed over the last 2 years is a very good sweet spot that the industry came to out of necessity from the pandemic, not necessarily out of a desire. So, and I think now it's really starting to coexist quite nicely.
Okay, how about you, Kristen?
Yeah, I really think Julie said it. It's about the people, about the connections that you're going to make. You just can't do those over a video screen or on a telephone. It's not the same. And it's, I mean, let's be honest, we're bringing toys to these shows. There's big trucks, big pieces of equipment. It's fun to climb on them, to touch it, to see what it's really going to look like when it comes down to your plant after you place your purchase order. So I think some things just can't be replaced by video. And I think those people connections and the experiences are definitely one of them.
It's because you mentioned something there, Julie, about the whole experience and the opportunity that presents itself to sort of combine the need for, as Kristen said, to have a machine there that people can climb all over and find out about the inner workings of it, both visitors and your competitors, obviously, and the opportunity for digital technology then to sort of enhance that overall experience, and finding the right mix between those two things to try and improve that visitor experience, if you like, when you get to the shows. That adds a whole new degree of complexity and skills to what is required to execute a trade show nowadays. Have you done much of that stuff in the trade shows that you've been doing up until now, Julie?
Prior to the slowdown, I'll call it a slowdown rather than a disruption. Disruption's a bit overused. Prior to the slowdown, I would say it was just used to accessorize. It was very much something that you would have on the side just to say, look at that fantastic, drone video, etc. In our new world, we just did a show in January in Austin, and we had the machine on the stand. We had a display drum with all the different options. So there was that element of touch, feel, experience, interact physically. But we also introduced for the first time an interactive kiosk so that people could actually interact with technology and just scroll through and find exactly what they were interested in and see things in a very different format. So I think it's the way going forward for us now is to make sure that we're really delivering to both sides of the equation, the people who want that full interactive touch and people who want to be able to explore more and in depth beyond what you can possibly move on to a trade show stand in the limited time that you may have there.
How about you, Kristen? And what's your experience of how you've used technology pre-COVID, if you like, and what the plans would be now?
Yeah, I think before COVID, it was very much secondary. I mean, we focused more on, what does the stand look like? How are we displaying the equipment? And so we offer some diagnostic programs, for example. I always struggled with how do I really display this? How do I get people engaged in the trade show floor? And having that kind of time to think about it and to work with it, we really focused on, let's get people involved in actually using it. And we worked on ways to use it on the trade show floor, whereas but before it might just have been a screen that showed how it worked. So we really focused on, how do people better engage with the technology side of our business? And also we had time and some resources to develop, some really cool animations and things like that. So video was always kind of secondary for us as well, but we spent some time over the last year really developing that and doing stuff that was just cool and different and engaging. And so now we have this nice mix of both the digital and the actual equipment on the floor. And I think it's working quite well so far. We tried it at MineXpo. We like the way it worked there. So we're going to continue forward with that.
Okay. And it sort of brings us back on to the next question I wanted to ask you. From the time I spent in the sector myself, I know how important the trade shows were to our general lead generation efforts. Can you tell us a little bit, if we start with you this time, Kristen, if you could tell us about how COVID and the subsequent cancellation of all the shows globally and what impact that had on your ability to generate leads over the last few years and how you dealt with that?
Yeah, so what was interesting was, I was at ConExpo when the COVID situation started and we flew home. And the very next week, I'm in my brand new home office, which I had to create since I was quarantined for 2 weeks. And all the calls and emails started to come in from everyone on our management team saying, okay, what are we doing in social media? So social media was a realm for our team, especially outside of marketing, that was everyone was hesitant to get involved in it. They weren't really sure about it and they didn't know what to do about it. And then it's like everyone woke up and thought, well, this is how we got to do this now. We got to get engagement in the social media. We have to be connected with people. We have to be present. And so we focused on, really building that following, on building really good blog content and videos to really drive that traffic and drive traffic to our website. And just to create material that our sales team could share with their customers. I mean, they weren't going in the door, every few weeks like they had been in the past. But what we did was we created content that they could share with them when they weren't able to visit. So rather than just, sending a traditional brochure or saying, hey, did you check this out on our website? Now we're writing helpful blogs and we're creating videos and sharing tips and tricks. And it kind of changed the way we develop our marketing content quite a bit.
Okay. How about you, Julie? What impact did it have on McCluskey's?
I think very similar to what Kristen's saying. We didn't reach out, I think, as directly to the external end buyer. But we worked very hard to make sure that our dealers had everything they needed. And as a part of that on the back engine, we were building our tech stack. So we were working very hard at looking into programs that would assist us to assist our immediate audience, our dealer network, and then would obviously trickle down and benefit to the end users. So we were looking at things like programs that would allow us to track IP addresses coming onto our website, to be able to assess the interest in certain products and in certain offerings. We were looking at CRM Lite. It wasn't pure CRM, but we were really trying to align those marketing analytics and that marketing research and the marketing information into one really comprehensive way to reach out digitally, as opposed to being able to go out to the show.
Okay. Okay. And I mean, outside of the big global shows, like your Con Expos and your Baumas in Munich, there are a lot of smaller but very significant shows still, like Hillhead in the UK, and Stein Expo in Germany, and Ag1 that we're all going to in just over a month's time. What can you tell us a little bit, Julie, if we start with you on this one? What other sort of in-person events do McCluskey's use as a lead generation and to assist with the sales and marketing efforts?
In the past, we've used a few things. One of the most popular, not just for us, but for our customers, are customer open days, and to actually let them come out to a site. With COVID, of course, there were a lot of site restrictions at all of our customer sites. So we really had to put that completely aside. But we're really looking forward to starting up that kind of interaction again around machines and at a customer site. The other thing that we're really looking forward to firing up again are our dealer events. They're always very popular to get everybody in one spot, the training, the networking, the team building, the excitement, frankly. When you get a bunch of people all passionate about something in a room, really miss that, and looking forward to kicking that off again and getting that going for McCluskey.
Okay, and how about you, Kristen?
We participate in the United States. We have an association called the National Stone, Sand, and Gravel Association. So they run shows like Ag1, for example. We've been more involved in their events and being part of their board and things like that the last couple of years. In Ontario here, we have a local association called the Ontario Stone, Sand, and Gravel Association. So we're pretty close with them. We always participate in their health and safety seminar. They do an operations tour, which stopped here last fall. So we had, I think, 50 producers come in through and do a plant tour with us. So those sorts of things. We run a dealer academy, which was unfortunately virtual last year, but we're hoping to bring that back. We tend to do that biannually. And then even with some of the publications, like Pit and Quarry magazine is a popular magazine here in North America, we get involved with a lot of their events, such as their roundtable, which happens every summer. So just ways of sharing what's going on in the industry and best practices, that sort of idea. And then also, actually, this week we're running our annual University of Toronto Screening Basics seminar. So there's a mineral processing class at University of Toronto, and their professor and I work together each year to put on a half-day seminar for these young students who are studying in the realm of mining.
Very good. I mean, it sort of connects back to the earlier point that you made, Kristen, around the trade shows and all those in-person events being important because people want to get under the bonnet, if you like, of the machines and want to sit sometimes literally under the bonnet of the machines and see exactly what's going on and how it's working. But is there another element of it that means that they stay important? Is the part about it's that wisdom of the crowd element. So, if you put 30 people or 50 people at an open day or on your stand at a trade show, and all of them together think that buying your machine is a good idea, then it gives all the individuals who are there a lot more comfort that somebody else thinks this is a good idea too. So the risk is automatically reduced by the fact that lots of other people seem to want to do this as well. And that's something you lose, I think, with the digital interactions you have with customers. They're not able to quite get that same feeling of, but everybody thinks this is a great machine, and I need to buy one because I want to be part of that crowd of people, I suppose. Is that another important part, particularly with the open days, Julie, I suppose, with your point, that if you can put a lot of potential customers on the side of a happy customer who's made the investment, the conversion rates from that tend to be very, very good.
They do. Whenever you get brand ambassadors in an existing customer site, talking about how they're using it and what they love about it, and then you bring other people there to hear their stories, I think it's very, very powerful. During the pandemic, we had to do it by video. It was customer testimonials. But I think really being there and experiencing it with other people who are interested in the same format or product or or crushing spread, screening spread, it has a huge impact. It really does. Herd mentality.
Moving on to you, Kristen. I suppose, my experience of the industry, no matter where you went in the world with the industry, is, the people who work in it are a sociable bunch. They like interacting with other people. They like speaking to other people who are using their machines, same machines that they're using, to try and find out, have they found out any other ways of maybe eking another few percent out of it production-wise, or workarounds that can just make the thing perform a little bit better? Is that part of the reason why you think people still like to go to those in-person events?
Absolutely. I think you're going to trust your peers before you trust, me as a manufacturer saying I have the best machine ever, right? You want to talk to people who've experienced that product and used it successfully. And yeah, they're in the same boat as you. Like if my fellow producer down the street from me is running Core X and I'm running Core Y and he has really good success with this machine, I should probably listen to him because he knows exactly what he's talking about and he knows, or he's trying to accomplish exactly what I'm trying to accomplish. So I think that peer feedback is so important. And customers, we've known this for a long time. Customers are your best marketers. Let them tell the stories for you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Now, when we talked about this last week, there was 3 elements of the planning process that we wanted to go through. So we want to talk about the pre-show experience, the at-show experience, and then what happens post-show. So thinking about pre-show, if we think about 2 of the biggest global shows, which we've mentioned already, ConExpo's been mentioned several times in Las Vegas, and Bauma down in Munich in Germany. Can you tell us, starting with you on this one, Kristen, can you tell us how far out from those big shows the planning process starts?
So we have this really awesome alarm clock where the show emails you about 2.5 years before the show and says, you need to buy your space. So that's my alarm to go, oh, we have to book the space in 2 months. I better get the team together and let's talk about what we want to do. So that's the point at which, we get together. We talk about what we want to accomplish at that show, even though it may be 2.5 years away. We put a plan together. We say, okay, we think we need this much space. This is what we want to show in the space. This is why. These are the people we think we want to bring. So it's very much a framework at that point. But that's definitely when you start to plan, because if you're spending a pile of money on buying square footage for a show, you better have some idea as to what it is you want to accomplish there.
Yeah, and I suppose, Julie, there needs to be a degree of flexibility in there as well, because very often you're talking about products that don't exist on the market yet. So there's a lot of unknowns around, is it going to be that size? Is it going to be that weight? Is it going to be that height? Is this going to work? How do you go about making sure whenever you're booking the stand space at those shows, Julie, that you're going to be able to fit the thing that doesn't exist yet onto your stand?
There is a lot of not even a glimmer in the eye of the engineers yet. Big shows. We're always dealing with, in fact, coming up with Bauma and ConExpo coming up within this next year, we're still working around the configuration of what the machines will be. So it is very, very much a flexibility game. What we do try to do is we set it up so that there is always a standard footprint for a structure. And then we work around it for the machines. That said, I've had a few shows where I've had to suddenly adjust the size of the structure down because we have some exciting machines. And frankly, that's what people are there to see. My beautiful chairs are exciting, but they really want to see, an R series screener. So we have had to constantly adjust, and we do that even as little as 5-6 months ahead on a big show. We're still tweaking the footprint and the floor plan. The other thing is, I was thinking about Kristen's comment about 2.5 years ahead. As I'm leaving our hotel rooms in Germany after Bauma, I'm booking for the next show 3 years ahead, because they go in Germany. You have to be right there, and as soon as you hand over your room key, say, I'll have that back in 3 years. Thank you. I'll get you the dates as soon as they're confirmed. And it is a lot of planning ahead for this sort of thing. But as you say, Peter, you can only plan so much that far in advance. You're going to need to be flexible.
Yeah. Okay, and connected to that, I suppose, we're talking about moving big lumps of metal and big lumps of machinery all across the world here. I'm sure that requires a fair, well, I know that requires a fair amount of collaboration across various different departments sort of within the organization. Could you talk to us a little bit, Kristen, about who you're working with at the early stages there, whenever you're booking stand space and deciding what goes on display?
Yeah, so we talked about, when that warning comes out that you need to book your space. So that's, that's the point where you say, okay, I think it's going to look something like this. And then once you start to figure out what those machines are going to be, they require a little bit more attention than normal machines. So you might want to use, let's say, a bit better quality paint, or you might want to put some decals on them that are a bit different, or maybe we're going to set up, some screen media on the machine a little bit different. They do require extra care. So I know way ahead of the machine, or way ahead of showtime, I'm on our production floor every day with the operations team, and these guys work hard. They know it's a trade show coming up. They know I'm picky. So you can always tell when it's trade show season. I walk on the floor and they're like, uh-oh, here's Kristen again. What does she want today? But these guys work so hard. And I mean, I only wish I could take them all to the show just to see what it is that they produce and how it looks and how people react to it. But it's a daily, probably a daily meeting with production to keep things on track. And just like the show, things go wrong and you come across things that you thought you had planned out and it turns out they're not working, and you just need to work at it one day at a time and get it ready.
I suppose in terms of the production scheduling, if you're producing, Julie, if you've got a machine that's the first time it's being produced and it's being produced for a show, and there's a slot in the factory for it to get made, very often, the customers, rightly so, come first. So I suppose there's a degree of stress around schedules getting moved and things, and you start getting very close to the date that the thing has to be on the sea for, and you're not, and there's suddenly a client project that is taking priority in the factory. So how do you go about sort of dealing with that and staying on top of that with all the people in the organization?
Well, particularly in this strange environment we're in right now with supply chain shortages and production headaches worldwide across our industry, it does get interesting. That said, most of our show machines are pre-sold to customers, and they get very excited that they're getting a show-ready machine because it does have all those really nice finishes and all those little tweaks. And so usually I'm fairly solid on our production schedule because it is already spoken for by a customer. And it's very exciting for them because if I take it to a show like ConExpo, we make sure we put their decal on it and promoting their company and everything. So it can be tricky. I think really we've been very lucky in the long run, but trade shows are a little unpredictable. So we'll see how the next two go.
Okay. And then thinking about, you spend a lot of time, obviously, leading up to these shows and a significant budget investment to go and do them. So you can't just turn up on the first day and it's not a build it and they will come sort of idea. There's a degree of work needs to go in pre-show to make sure that you have the visitor numbers and the right people coming along to see you at the show. Can you tell us a little bit, if we start with you, Julie, about some of the pre-show activity that you would do to try and drive interest and drive visitors to your booth when the show's happening?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because we've been changing it up quite a bit recently. It used to be when I started in this business, the postcard was the ultimate holy grail of the way to reach out to people for a trade show. And, the show provided these templates and you thought this is magic and I'll just plug in my logo and I'll say, this machine is going to be here and they will all come. And they will actually keep my postcard on their fridge and they will share it with their friends. And we're in such a different world now. We really need to reach out to them in new ways. And in fact, with all of the privacy restrictions happening in different geographies between GDPR and Castle and everything else, the way that we approach our lists has changed completely because we need to respect the privacy requirements in each geography and how we reach out. So we have found that the most effective way to do it is through digital opt-in. So if they are actually approaching us and saying, yes, I want to hear more about what you're doing at the show, that's one method. The other method is through social media, obviously. Engage, 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 engage. Get people excited ahead of the show. Tell them what's going to be happening. Make sure that they're coming on board with you and that you have that build-in excitement. And then the third pillar that we really operate on is the media relations side. And we spend quite a bit of time ensuring that we have relevant news to share via a news conference, at a show, sending out information ahead of the show, and getting as much coverage as we can out there from an editorial perspective. Going hand in hand with that, again, of course, is advertising to raise some awareness and get people excited as well. So those are the four main pillars that we do. Of course, there's always lots of ways that you can get out and talk to people, but those are the main ones we use.
Okay, how about you, Kristen? Is there anything different that you're doing there that you want to tell us about?
No, I mean, we certainly do everything that Julie has talked about. Other than that, just thinking, just getting the sales team on board with, hey, the show's coming up. Here's what we're displaying. Here's what's going to be new. When you're out visiting your customers, just make sure you're, checking in with them to see, are you coming? Can we meet you there? Can we have dinner when we're there? Just to try and get that engagement before they go. And maybe they haven't even thought about going. So, just reminding them that, hey, that Egg One or the Con Expo is coming up. We hope to see you there.
And I think, is there an element of no matter how far ahead you might start planning for the show, there are some things that you just that can't be done until the last minute anyway. And it's only in the month or two maybe before the show date that people are really starting to think about it and will start paying attention to it because they're thinking about their trip and how they're going to try and make the most of the trip, or how they're going to try and justify 3 or 4 days out of the office to go to the show in the first place. So is there a degree that, no matter how much planning you're doing, there's an inevitable chaos in that 3 or 4 week lead into the show just because of the nature of when you can actually do those communications, Kristen?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, you can be a few weeks out and think you have everything nailed, and then you realize, oh, we have to deal with this issue, or whatever it may be. But the beauty thing about digital and social media is you can change messages and your strategy and your schedules on the fly. It's not like the old days of when you were only doing print and you had to have your material to the magazine 6 weeks out or whatever the timeline was. I mean, you can really be agile and change things as you go. So thank goodness for that. I mean, I think especially in North America, we are the kings and queens of last minute. Things are constantly changing, even hours before this stuff happens.
Okay, how about you, Julie? I mean, is that your experience as well? That, the last couple of months is always a bit of a whirlwind?
Absolutely. And not just purely on that sort of marketing promotion side, but when you get down to the actual logistics. So we'll have, hotel rooming lists so crisp and so beautiful down to whether they want a feather or a foam pillow. And then chaos is wreaked across the entire thing in the week or two before. All of a sudden it's like, oh, actually I'm bringing 6 customers, or yeah, no, I actually want 2 nights and I really did want a foam pillow, never mind the feather pillow. So, it gets a little chaotic around those logistics as well. Even around the display. I night before Con Expo was opening, on one episode, I had the machines all positioned, and we have track mobile equipment. So all the tracks were pristine, painted beautifully with a black gloss, looked like basically an auto show quality. And our upper management came onto the booth and quite rightly wanted a machine moved. And they were right. When I looked at it, my first instinct was, oh God, don't move that machine. We've just got the tracks painted and dried. But when we moved it, it looked much better. But then we had to paint the track. So the team was getting the machine moved and prepared and ready for the show basically until 2 a.m. Is that something we could have anticipated? Absolutely not. Could we have anticipated that suddenly 20 more hotel rooms were needed a week before the event? Absolutely not. We can plan as much as we want, but there's an inherent chaos leading up to the show. And I think it hits particularly in the last 2 weeks.
Okay. And leading, I think another big part of the design element, I mean, you touched on the stand layout and design there, Julie, but a huge part of the show is a good booth design. So how important is it to have a good booth designer for this show. And Julie, I suppose, you know, how do you go about qualifying these people whenever you're looking for a good partner?
Well, we recently just changed our provider, actually, coincidentally, after having a relationship with one for about 8 years. I have generally divided the world up a bit. I have one stand designer over in the European rest of world market, and then I have one that does primarily North America and the Americas. And the reason I do that is more logistics driven by getting the assets moved from country to country. Shipping from North America all the way over to Russia is a little more involved than shipping it from Germany. So we do have two companies. The way we vet them is really based on their experience. Because when we're moving in this huge equipment, we really need somebody who understands that you don't put the plants in first and that the machines have to go in first. And we have had that before where they landscaped and then the machines just rolled right over everything. So, you know, understanding our business and the equipment is very important. Understanding what we're trying to achieve. In the past 10 years with McCloskey, I would say that what we are trying to achieve out of each show visually and in the structure and the stand design has changed radically. It's not even a small change over that 10 years. And I think we're going to continue to evolve. So I think at this point, we really need to continue to have agile partners in this area who are going to continue and evolve and grow with us. And that means, you know, continual communication, relationship building, and assessments.
Okay, and a key part of that, I think, Julie, is, you know, making sure that they stay hungry enough to keep coming up with really good stand concepts, because, you know, as the person organising the show internally from McCloskey's, I suppose you've got so many things to think about that you need a partner you can trust to say, this is the stand, this is the number of people we're going to have, these are the areas I kind of think I'm going to need, but I need you to help me out here in terms of best practice and what's happening across other sectors and industries.
Yes. Yeah. And it is a constant assessment just to see, you know, where we're at and making sure that, you know, everything is staying fresh. And they do need to take a lot of that work away from you because, you know, you're working on so many different things. For an upcoming show, I'm working on dealer meetings and dealer entertainment and training sessions and news conferences and the actual, you know, equipment technology moving in. So you need a customer you can absolutely rely on to take all of those logistical elements away from you and come up with some fresh designs.
Okay, and how about you, Kristen? What would you do you think that, going back to Julie's point, I suppose, about, you know, needing to know that the machines go in first and then you go in afterwards, do you think it's important that your booth designer necessarily has experience in this sector, or do you find cross-sector tends to work just as well?
That's an interesting question. I think I can't see why it wouldn't hurt to, you know, be an expert in our sector, or at least heavy equipment in general. I mean, this is heavy stuff. Once you get in place, you really don't want to move it. And I think similar to Julie, we've been working with a house now we're on our third trade show house. I think we've been with them 4 or 5 years now. But it's very much a relationship, like any relationship. You have to have good communication, and you have to, you know, understand the goals and what you're trying to achieve in this event. And if you don't have that, if it feels off, it's just not going to work. And I've been in that position with 2 previous trade show houses where, you know, it was okay at the start and we just weren't seeing eye to eye, and it was not working. And you have a matter of days to get this stuff in place and done. And if it's not working, if you can't communicate with these people, it's just not going to come together the way you want it to. And even the people, the show house I've been working with, I get the same manager on my floor for the last several shows, and he's just fantastic. We know each other. I can call him anytime. I know if I have to step away for a meeting or a lunch or something, he's got it. He can handle it. And if something comes up, he will call me, but I don't need to be there every second of every day anymore. So it's paramount. Like Julie said, if so much else going on, you're trying to organize your people, your dealers, your events. You can't be on the floor every second watching this equipment come into place and watching the whole thing come together.
Okay. Okay, I wanna go back a few steps actually, because there's a question that's just come in from Tim Monroe of Smiley Monroe, who we were talking about before we went on air. Tim's just said, did Kristen and Julie talk about the success or the return on investment of the previous show at the planning stage in order to determine, the space booking size and the budget for the next show? Is that something that's part of those conversations at the very start? If we start with you, Julie, on that one.
Short answer, absolutely. We look back always, we look forward always. And we look back at what worked really well, and we look forward to things that didn't go well being, addressed. So I think it's a very key part. In fact, right after every show, I will do a post-mortem while it's fresh on the plane. Because if I wait until I get back to the office and everything starts piling up that, is resulting from the show, it won't be fresh in my mind. So I will do a post-mortem, the good, the bad, the ugly, on the plane on the way home. And then that serves as the basis document for working on the next one. And it's very important to do that from the planning side. From the return on investment side, that is so much more complicated. And it brings up the fact that I very rarely will jump in and use the term ROI. I prefer return on engagement. So our return on engagement is a measurement that I find is a little bit easier to explain to our management teams, because I can talk about how many people started communicating with a dealer after a show, after they had seen something. How many people asked for more follow-up information in the way of collateral or anything like that. So do we take the last show's ROI into account? Yes, you can't ignore ROI. There are people that will always want the number, for sure. But I think the return on engagement for the planning stages of the next show is the most important to us.
Okay, how about you, Kristen?
Yeah, similar to Julie, we look at, ROI and ROE on that. So, between the last, let's say it's a Con Expo, between the last Con Expo and this one coming up, which of those leads have we turned into good customers? What have we signed a new dealer? It's hard to measure exact ROI in a trade show, but what big deals have we had come through the door since the last one that were with people we met at that show? And then even from the planning perspective, we'll go back and say, okay, where are all these leads coming from? If you have, for example, half your leads are from the state of Arizona, well, obviously your sales team that's based in Arizona should be at that show. If I'm getting no leads from Canada, why would I send Canadian reps to the show? It might not necessarily make sense. We look at that in terms of who should be there as well. And, what kind of leads are we seeing? What kind of meetings are we going to have at the show? And make sure we have the right team in place.
Okay, if we move on a bit now to the at-show element of it, I want to talk a little bit about setup week. I have mixed feelings about setup week, because while I'm there, I think I hate it more than I hate anything else. But after the show, I always some of the best memories I have are from the weeks that in the setup. I think there is a real sort of community and camaraderie, and I'm conscious that I've totally contradicted myself here as well. But there is that sense of everybody's there, and there's that sense of anticipation before the show opens, and you're getting there before anybody else is getting there, and you're getting to have a look around and see what everybody else is doing. So, what we start with you, Kristen. What's your overall feeling of setup week and the value or the enjoyment that it brings?
I would say my love for it increases with each show. At the beginning of my trade show life, I hated it. It was just, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how to plan. Everything fell apart. I would cry. Like, it was awful, but it gets better. And I like a few things about setup week. I usually bring one person from our team to help me, work with the trade show house and get some of that heavy lifting in place. Just get a second set of eyes from our team on how does this look and that sort of thing. And when you bring someone new to that, so I brought someone new at the MindExpo show we just did in September, and to see the show through their eyes, like the wonderment of how does this actually come together. The night before the show opens, it still looks like chaos. And then you walk in the next morning and it's pristine, and you look at that person and they're like, how did they do this overnight? It's so much fun to see it through their eyes. And the other thing I really like about setup week is we may be in an industry where we have competitors and we don't necessarily want to interact with those competitors. But on the marketing scene, I think that's a bit different. Some of my best friends and my go-to people when I need advice and help in this industry are marketing people who are working for our competitors. So I've built this great network of friends and colleagues who are all in marketing in our industry. And even if it's not a trade show, even if you're struggling with something, like I called I called someone in marketing who worked for our competitor about HubSpot, for example. I was looking at using HubSpot and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with it. So I called a few people and I said, are you using this? How are you using this? And everyone is so willing to help and just be there for you. And you can meet with those people during setup week when your sales team's not there yet, and work on those connections a little bit more and get to know each other while you're sweating it out on the trade show floor.
Okay, what about you, Julie? What's your experience of trade show setup week?
100% agree with Kristen on the competitors as friends model. It's a lot of fun in the setup week. Before the whole sales competition comes into play and the contest to get the most customers onto your stand, there is that level playing field. Does anybody have a Leatherman? I need to cut this or do that. And it's fantastic. And when I started at my first BAMA back in 2013, I was not familiar with this model. And I was like looking over my shoulder at people who were coming onto my booth with great suspicion. And my setup team, at the end of the day, a very hard day, all of a sudden, all these competitors are coming onto my stand. They're on their bicycles, they're all rolling on, and my team are going into the bar and opening up the beer and the wine and handing my competitors these beverages. And I was gobsmacked because I'd never seen anything like it. Now it's so normal for me because it is the best time of a show in my mind to get to know everyone on a level playing field. We're all there to get a job done. We're all there to enjoy each other's company, and it's very, very different. That said, that's usually the first front end of the setup. You start getting closer to opening day, and then the adrenaline really starts to kick in, right? And I had one dealer who was actually at a bar taking odds and bets that I wouldn't have the stand finished in time at ConExpo 2014 because he'd been there at 8:00 at night the night before the show opened. He lost, fortunately, but it's crazy adrenaline in those last 2 days beforehand, because while everything seems to be going swimmingly, all of a sudden when the deadline looms, you're going crazy.
Yeah. Okay, and I mean, you touched on it a little bit. Trade setup week. One of the best things about I have to be careful. I can't be careful about how I say this. So one of the best things about setup week is the sales guys aren't there yet. So if we move on to talk about the stand team, then what can you tell us, just to give people an idea who aren't familiar with these sort of massive shows? Kristen, what size of a stand team do you typically have if you think about ConExpo, and how does that differ from some of the smaller shows?
Yeah, ConExpo, I think we usually have, so for some reference, our booth is usually around 3,000 square feet. We're in an outdoor space. So we typically bring between 12 and 15 people. So that's going to be the president of our company out of the Canadian facility here, the VP of sales, all the product managers come because they're the ones with all the knowledge. We talked before about, looking at where leads tend to come from. So we don't take all of the salespeople, but we try to bring a good cross section based on the territories that we typically see, and maybe we want to introduce a new sales rep to Trade Show Life, so that's a good opportunity to do that. I go as marketing, of course, to fill in for marketing needs, press, fill in where people need breaks. So it's really a cross section of everyone that keeps the trade show going.
Okay, and how about you, Julie? I mean, what sort of stand team did McCluskey have at some of the major shows?
For the major shows, for reference, we usually have for McCloskey dedicated about 20,000 square feet. And then for Lippman, which is our sister company, it is another 10,000 square feet. So we're usually around 30,000 square feet of exhibit space. We bring in a team, I would say, combined between the two companies of about 25, maybe 30. But we also rely on our dealers to man the stand. So it's a wonderful cooperation, actually, because while they all have their dedicated territories, when we're at a show, they are more than willing to go and talk to somebody beside a machine from a totally different area and to keep them engaged while the sales rep for that area is found. So it's a really good mix of McCloskey and our dealer network. The other thing is that we bring in engineering. It's really valuable when we're introducing new products at a show to have the engineers who designed it right on the site and able to talk about what they did to create the unique selling features of that machine and how it works. We also have an aftermarket side there at all times so that they can talk to people about our aftermarket services around warranty and service, etc. And then we also have the supply chain there and the purchasing so that they can have people come up to them and have meetings and talk about our supply chain and purchasing needs at the show.
Okay, it's interesting you mentioned actually that diversity of roles on the stand, because I remember going to with Tim Monroe, actually, who's one of the people who commented earlier. We went to the Con Expo pre-show briefing. It was in Chicago. I think it was pre-2014. And it was in the August before the show was happening in the March. And the NSSTA, I think, were presenting a whole lot of data. No, it was the AEM. It was the AEM. We're presenting a whole lot of data around the visitor profile and the surveying that they had done of previous visitors. And one of the most striking things for me from that was they said an awful lot of people who visit the show were saying, you know, we see the sales guys, we know your dealers because we meet them. They're the people who we meet just as part of the everyday operation of their business. But what we would like to see more of on the trade show stands are other people from the organization. So we want to meet the people who are designing the products. We want to meet the guys who are looking after the spares and the after sales side. We want to speak to the project managers. We want to find out who's running the business, you know, and find a little bit more out about them. Is that something, Kristen, based on what Julie said there, do you have that sort of diversity of different roles in different parts of the organization, so it's not just like 20 or 30 sales guys standing on the stand every show, that there is that broad sort of range?
Yeah, I'm glad Julie brought up engineering. That is something we've done for most of the bigger shows, at least, as well, as bring in someone from engineering who, you know, again, can talk to the new products, how things are designed, and just really bring that aspect to the team as well. And then, you know, in addition to our product managers, we definitely have the service team there, because that's something people are always wanting to talk about, you know, service and maintenance, and, you know, if I buy this machine, what's my life with it going to look like, kind of thing. Purchasing isn't something we have brought to the show, but certainly something to look at going forward.
Yeah, I think it is a good one, actually, because it's very easy for I'm not making many friends during this, I've realized, with some of the things I'm going to say, but it's very easy for purchasing to be a bit of a blocker sometimes. And whenever because usually there's a distance between them and the customer in terms of a personal relationship. And I always find that once, because of the range of roles of people that we had on the stand, that the relationships across the organization were better, whether it be finance, operations, engineering, or sales, or after sales. You know, once you've had a beer on the stand with a customer, when he emails you asking about payment terms or asking you about, you know, letters of credit or whatever it is, the conversation tends to go a lot better, because the more of that personal relationship has sort of been developed over time. Has that been your experience as well?
Yes, absolutely. It changes everything when you can meet someone one-on-one.
Yeah, okay. So we have another question come in here from Eamon Connolly. So he's asked, while at the show, what tips would you give for networking with co-exhibitors? After all, not all of them are competitors. So Julie,
that's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And we do quite a bit with other people in the industry at these shows. They're a gathering place. Let's admit it. It's very rare that you can get that many people in various capacities in one space, right? So other co-exhibitors, absolutely. They can be current suppliers of ours. They can be people that are offering us something that's new that we haven't seen before, that would augment the productivity or capability of our equipment. It's absolutely a great place to really network and get to know a lot of people at once.
Okay, and you, Kristen?
Yeah, I can think of one specific example on the marketing side of things. I think it was at ConExpo 17. We had a vendor approach us with some software to create a sales app, which is something we had been kind of looking at the time. It was a vendor based in Syracuse, New York, actually. And they stayed in contact with us probably for a year or so after the show. And then we got really interested in building such an app. So I went down to Syracuse and met with them. And we looked at what we could do together. And probably midway through last year, we launched this sales app that we worked on together that was a result of this company approaching us at the trade show. Until then, we really hadn't thought about how we would build such a thing. So from the marketing side, it worked out quite well for us.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones that I've had them myself at trade shows where you come across people who are selling something that maybe you don't need now, but you stay in touch because things change, and a few years down the line, the situation might evolve, and you might end up being of some use to each other. So, yeah, it's a good one. Another question's come in from Marissa Pellegrini, who's asked, this is an interesting one, if you could give 1 to 2 pieces of advice to a new trade show marketer or coordinator, what would it be? And I'll give you that one to Julie. Nice easy question to start with, Julie.
There's so many that I would go back and tell myself 10 years ago. But I would say that number one is find a really good program to keep track of all the details. The devil is in the details on these trade shows. And if you have something that really works for you, and it doesn't matter if the best thing for you is a piece of paper and check boxes, or whether it's a nice high-end Monday.com color-coded visual aid, whatever it is, that I think is really, really important to help you try and keep track of everything. The other thing is really don't sweat it at the front end when things go wrong. As we discussed earlier in this, things are going to go wrong. It's never necessarily a reflection of you as a trade show marketer. It is often a reflection of what is going on in the trade show around you. So, you have to develop a little bit of a thick skin there and say, all right, well, I did everything I could have done to prevent this from going south, but things are going to happen. So, that's a very key part of it, is just to be kind to yourself and realize it's a bit of a crazy start for anybody in this industry.
Okay, what about you, Kristen? What advice would you give to somebody starting out on the trade show marketing circuit?
Yeah, one thing I think would be to say, and I realize you haven't been in your industry long, but look at your industry and reach out to some of your competitors through social media, like their marketing teams through social media, and say, hey, I'm new to this company, I'm new to the industry, I'm preparing for trade show XYZ, appreciate connecting with you. And any tips or advice you guys could give me would be great. I would be happy to offer anyone, from my war stories, things that have helped me along the years. And I think that could really help you to start to build that network right up front. I mean, social media is wonderful for doing that. It certainly wasn't around when I started my trade show career. And another thing is, going back to what Julie said about being kind to yourself. I can remember my early shows, I had a different boss back then, and he was really particular about details, and he would be on me, every 20 or 30 minutes at the trade show going, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we change that? Can we add this? And I was so overwhelmed because in my mind, I'm thinking I have to make him happy. I have to make sure all these things happen. And then I took a step back and realized, well, this isn't all possible, but my job is to find out if they're possible, what they cost, and then come to my boss and say, well, yes, we can do it, or no, we can't. And here's what we're looking at in terms of investment or time, or whatever it may be. And once the team you're working with, your boss or whomever it is, understands that there's more to this than it looks, and there's a lot more to it than it looks from people who aren't involved in it, I think you'll find it's easier to work through some of those challenges up front.
Yeah, it's one of the things I was thinking from an advice perspective would have been similar to what you said, Kristen, actually, about just develop a very good filtering mechanism for those inevitable requests that happen on the stand. You develop I developed a mechanism for deciding, without telling the person who was asking me for the specific change or the thing to be done, deciding very quickly in my head whether I was going to do anything with that information or not. Or whether I would never have said, I'm not doing that. But it was like, I'm going to ignore that because I know it'll go away.
Yeah.
Whereas other things, you're like, okay, I have to do this. Because you've got, with a stand team, like you said, with a stand team of 50 to 20 people and senior people in the organization, they're turning up and it's this and move this and do this, and can we have this extra? Just from a capacity and a logistics point of view, you have to be able to decide internally, okay, what is actually possible here and what is going to improve the overall experience, rather than an awful lot of the time suggestions are quite a subjective emotional reaction to something, rather than, we've been across an awful lot of data and research to get to the point where we have on the stand. So trying to maintain that while staying agile and accepting your own limitations time-wise, trying to combine all those things. And if you can, tell me how. And that ends up delivering a better sort of show experience for everybody, I think. I'm very conscious of time here. There's an awful lot covering here, but I'm conscious of time. So I'm going to skip through a few more questions. And something you touched on there, Kristen, from the outside, the shows can all look very glamorous. And it's hard to convince people that they're not. Whenever you come back from Las Vegas in March with a tan, having been stood outside for 7 days, and people, family, friends, colleagues who were working out of the office were saying, oh, you were in a jolly in Vegas for the week. But how important is a pair of comfortable shoes and a comfortable bed?
Oh my gosh, they're paramount. And not only, we'll start with the bed thing, not only a comfortable bed, but I like, if we're in Vegas and I'm there for 2 weeks, because show setup, show tear down, it can be 2 weeks sometimes or longer. I like to get a room where I can at least have a fridge and maybe a microwave and way of making my own food, because I don't want to be eating out all the time. It will kill me. I'd rather just have, let's say, oatmeal and tea in my room in the morning and not have to go to Starbucks every day. Not to mention you're waiting in line for 2 hours at Starbucks in Vegas. And I'm not even kidding. It's crazy. So yeah, I think the comfortable room and giving yourself time to breathe in that room. Like, you need some alone time every day or your team will drive you crazy because they'll be on you with all kinds of requests. So you need to carve out that 5 minutes for yourself and make sure your bed's comfortable and you have some nice healthy snacks. As far as shoes, I used to do the cute shoes. I've done heels at Bama. Forget it. You must have comfortable shoes, and not just one pair. I often will bring one or two extra pairs with me to the show every day, so I can change them every few hours, because your feet are much happier when you do. And we've got to the point where with our team where running shoes, if they look, fairly professional, are perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, because I fully subscribe to the opinion that if your feet are sore, you're just in a bad mood.
I must. And not only during the show, but during setup week as well. You need to be comfortable. It's paramount.
Yeah. How about you, Julie?
Yeah, we always rent a house on Airbnb or VRBO or a similar homestay program, and I put the setup crew there. So it's like this little family pocket. That's always a lot of fun, sort of take turns cooking, and everybody has their own space. We usually make sure it's a big enough layout that nobody's on top of each other, because that can be a little weird with your coworkers. So we just make sure that it's all laid out nicely. And it's great because I usually stay right through while the setup crew will go home. And I'll stay right through. And anybody who wants to stay off strip in ConExpo, and there are more people than you can imagine who quietly would like to be off strip, will come and stay at the house. And then we have it for the teardown as well. So it's really quite comfortable. I head off to the local grocery stores and everything, and I load up the fridge, and we pack up lunches every day in the back of the car, and it's quite fun. And then what we do generally for footwear, well, first ConExpo, I learned very quickly when a colleague needed me to go to a drugstore and buy every blister guard, blister bandage, blister Band-Aid, whatever it was that they had for her. And I was not far behind her. So I was delighted that she made the request. So yeah, I bring 2 or 3 pairs usually. And at the end of the show day, those any other shoe other than running shoes are off immediately and into running shoes.
Okay. And then at the show, can you tell us a little bit then, obviously the inquiries and the sales leads are the most important part of the work you do at the show. Kristen, could you tell us about some of the different mechanisms that you used for capturing those inquiries and how maybe that's changed over the time that you've been involved?
So yeah, Peter, when I started, I, like you, would build a trade show lead form on paper with all the questions, places to fill in the contact information. We'd have lots of pens on hand and clipboards and a stapler, so you could staple a business card on there. And then I would go home and enter every one of them into an Excel sheet. And that was obviously very painful, not to mention you can make mistakes with phone numbers, emails, you name it. So that's where it started. And then I realized very quickly that, these shows offer lead retrieval systems. These can be expensive. I mean, I just booked one for Egg One. I think it's just over $1,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but I mean, $1,000 if you're going to sell a multi-$1,000 piece of equipment is totally worth it. So the shows kind of have a monopoly on this, where it's not the same system every time. It's not like you can buy the software yourself. But it is definitely worth the investment. You can set it up with your own survey questions. You can have check boxes based on what you're bringing to the show, but they're absolutely worth it and totally my recommendation.
Okay, I'm assuming your experience is similar, Julie.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And I find that it's interesting. I was at a compost show last month, and somebody came up and asked me for a pen. I didn't have a pen. Like, pen? Really? Okay, those are packed up in the little merch thing that we're going to give away to people. That you're asking me to use a pen. It's changed so much, from the earlier days where it's now all digital.
Okay, and then thinking of rolling that forward then to when you come home after the show, how do you go about managing that post-show activity then? How do you work with the sales guys and your dealers, Julie, as well, to manage that process and make sure you can sort of track the response to those inquiries as you go on before the planning starts for the next one?
Well, in the early days, obviously, we would sit there with our Excel spreadsheets and try and plug in all the leads and sort them by territories and names and shoe sizes and whatever else we were measuring against. Now it's a little bit different in that, similar to what Kristen's using at Ag One, I am as well. And the swap portal does most of the hard, heavy lifting for you. It also provides real time. So instead of me having to wait until after the show to get the leads to my salespeople, if I've got a hot lead that day, I can get it to them before they go out and have dinner that night. So it's changed radically in that respect, that we're now much more responsive, and the follow-up is a lot easier for us, enabled by the technology out there.
Okay, and how about you, Kristen? Is it similar for you?
Yeah, it's similar, and the technology also allows you to build like follow-up marketing programs where when your contact information was in an Excel sheet, that wasn't as easy to do. But now you have different pieces of marketing software like HubSpot, for example, where you can load those leads in and say, okay, this is how I'm going to nurture those leads until they're ready to buy. So the programs out there to take care of leads now are phenomenal compared to the old spreadsheets or literally even the PDF forms that I used to send out to the sales team, over a decade ago. I mean, it's come leaps and bounds.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, it's connected to this one, but it's probably maybe rolling back to when we're at the show a little bit. Do either of you do? It goes back to your point, Julie, about whenever you leave the show. I mean, I remember my notes function on my phone used to be just full of the week, because you'd see something on a stand somewhere and you'd be like, oh, it'd be a good idea to try that at the next show, or this didn't work as well as I thought it was going to, or so just so it was documented and it was fresh in your head. How do you approach the sort of did you do an end of day briefing with the stand team at all to figure out, okay, who are we speaking to today, who are the hot prospects, who have we got coming tomorrow, what time are they coming, who do we need to have here for when they're coming? Was that part of the way you work at the shows?
Sort of. It's a little more casual than that, I think. There was nothing ever formally done in that respect. There is a formal briefing at the front end of the show about what we're trying to achieve and what the new products are and what is expected of everybody on the stand, dealers and staff. During the show, it's a lot more, it's a role that I take on very actively because I'm quite passionate to make sure that nobody misses any opportunities or any information. So during the day, it's more ongoing. And then towards the end of the day, if I happen to be out for dinner at a dealer dinner with the sales reps, then we'll do a little post-mortem, a hash out ourselves on that. So a little more casual, I think.
Okay, how about you, Kristen? Is it as structured as I laid out, or maybe a little bit more casual?
It's similar. We do a pre-show meeting with the entire team where we go through the booth and what's going on that week and everything. And that will often happen either the afternoon before the show opens or the morning of, depending on the schedule. And then for a bigger show like a ConExpo or a MineExpo, we'll generally do a quick like huddle every morning where we get everyone together and say, okay, is there anything remarkable that happened yesterday? What's going on today? What are the events happening today? If there's a dinner or a lunch or a meeting, what have you. Just so everyone's kind of aware of the schedule and what's coming up for that next day. And then also we always put together a WhatsApp chat group so that everyone on the show floor or on the show team is in that WhatsApp chat group. And if I need to remind them of something during the day or something cool happens, we can just chat with each other that way. So if you're not on the show floor at that point, if you're off having lunch or you're at a meeting, you still get those updates.
Okay. Just a couple of things to wrap up now. I mean, and this is largely based on my own experience, but the whole trade show marketing experience, it's hard, it's stressful, there's a big investment of time and money, but we keep going back. So start with you, Julie. What are the best and worst parts of the trade show experience for you?
Oh, that is a narrow question because I would have about 100 items for each category. I think the best is I really need to get out and see people. And I know our customers do too, and our sales reps do too. And I think the best part of the trade show is just that, getting out. Now, of course, this may be, magnified by being in a bubble for 2 years and away from people. But, even before COVID hit, I was just always so happy to see everyone and be out there, and the opportunity to exchange ideas constantly. The worst part, I think, honestly, Peter, I can't even really come up with anything concrete because they tend to come up on the fly. On the fly, all of a sudden everything's going great, and all of a sudden everything derails, and then you're back on track again and everything derails. So a specific example, but more around the fact that the unpredictability of certain things can be a little rattling, and if you can't find an immediate solution, that can be a little demoralizing.
Okay, and how about you, Kristen? Best and worst?
Yeah, the best is definitely the people. I mean, you don't get to see these people every day or even every year for that matter. So just reconnecting with customers, with dealers, with the marketing team that you get to know throughout setup week is fantastic. And just watching people experience everything that you've created is just really cool. You're like, I built this. This is my baby. And look at all these people just experiencing the equipment and the interactions with people. That's when you have a chance to step back and look at that every now and then, that's just an awesome feeling. The worst part, I mean, like Julie, I think I've come to the point where you just expect the worst and you just get through it and you get through it. And you're going to have multiple tragedies and chaotic moments every single day and you just get through them. I always have one moment where I'm like, oh my God, I can't fix this. I just can't. I don't know what to do. And then 5 minutes passes and you take a walk and you get a coffee and you're like, okay, I'm back. I can do it.
I was just going to say that's the point. That's the point where you go for a walk, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't let anyone see that. You can't fall apart in front of your team. You have to they need to know that you're in control, and you got to make them comfortable and keep them going. So you will have that moment, and you just got to get through it.
Yeah, the big surprise for me is nobody mentioned stand uniforms as the worst part of it. I always find between that and Julie's point of the hotel room bookings just changing like 7 hours before people are due to arrive, you know. Those two things, it would have been enough. Yeah, if I could remove those things from the trade show experience, I would happily accept everything else. And finally, just to wrap up then, so what's the next big thing on the agenda for you trade show wise? If we start with you, Julie, and what have you got anything big planned at it?
Actually, very exciting. A big trade show in a new market with a new team is coming up. We have just committed to XCon India in Bangalore in May. So that is, we've now opened up facilities in India for manufacturing and a sales office, and just signed on a couple of new dealers. So there's a lot wrapped up in this show now, whereas before it was, let's put a stand into XCon India. Now it's, we have new dealerships to celebrate. We have new manufacturing capabilities to tell people about. We have, so many exciting developments in that region. So that's the next big one for us. And because there's no template for it, like ConExpo or Obama for us, it's going to be pretty exciting to move ahead with.
Very good, very good. And how about you, Kristen?
I mean, we're just so excited to be back at Trade Show Life. We're going to AG1 in Nashville, and Nashville is one of my favorite cities, not to mention trade show cities in the US. So I'm really looking forward to that, and the team here is as well. And then also we took on responsibility for Australia just before COVID. So we haven't really done any trade show work there, but that's something we're looking at doing this summer as well. And I have a little bit of experience from working with our Australian team back a few years ago, but I haven't really taken the lead on that. So just looking forward to building a new connection with a new trade show house and understanding how things work there. And I've learned that on the different continents, trade shows do work quite a bit differently. So we'll have to see how things work in Australia.
It's great to see, and I mean, it's there's definitely plenty of global opportunities going on there. And as we'll know, the last conversation I had with you both last week in preparation for this was an expensive one, because within 24 hours I was suddenly going to AG1 in Nashville. So so I'm looking forward to that myself, and I'm looking forward to going as a visitor this time and seeing all the work that you and everybody else has put in. So thank you very much for your time. I'm conscious that this is Monday morning in Canadian time, so very appreciative of you taking your Monday mornings out to do this with us. Hopefully the people who are watching find that useful, and good luck with the next trade show. Good luck with XCon in India, Julie, and I will see you both in Nashville in May. And just final thing to say, I suppose, is thanks to everyone who watched this, and it'll obviously be available to watch back again on our various different channels, which we'll share the links to.